Hello, everyone. Good day. My name is Vincent Obia, a researcher, and I recently completed my PhD at Birmingham City University. I'm currently a lecturer in the Department of Mass Communication, University of Lagos. And here is my talk on who makes AI decisions, Africa as technology receiver and standard taker. So here's the outline for the presentation. So looking at Africa's technology receiver, then a standard taker, then the strategies and initiatives in Africa, the need that I see for a transcontinental partnership, and the need for inclusive, flexible, and a systemic approach to multi-stakeholder governance. And just to note also throughout this presentation that there's really no one singular monolithic experience across Africa. So Africa has diverse cultures, diverse beliefs and regions, and so there are diverse set of experiences in Africa. So in a way, there are like many Africas. There is no one singular Africa, in that regard. But the issue that I touch on in this presentation still applies in some shape or form to most African countries. So just to bear that in mind. So receiving AI technologies, increasingly African governments, and other actors on the continent are adopting AI technologies, for general social outcomes, healthcare, education, agriculture, all kinds of economic areas, in all kinds of economic spheres in the continent. And these technologies largely come from the global north, so Western or Chinese sources. And the danger that I see in all of this is that Africa might most likely become passive a consumer of adopting these technologies. Speaking to what Gwagwa et al. Called the cookie cutter approach, which is a wholesale adoption of AI technologies developed for populations elsewhere. It also means that AI technologies then do not apply neatly to Africans, as we see, for instance, with natural language processing and surveillance systems. In surveillance systems where these data systems are trained on populations elsewhere, and so they mostly white bodies. And so when you apply them to black bodies in Africa, it then means there's danger of misapplication, of misrepresentation in most cases. And also in languages where African languages sometimes in natural language processing tend to be misinterpreted simply because they've not factored in the African context and the African experience. And when it comes to taking regulatory standards also, by receiving this technology, Africa automatically also receives, or African countries automatically receive the regulations, the standards that are baked into them. And what I see most African countries, that the focus is on developing or adopting AI systems for economic ends. So for the future of work, so looking at how AI can be used to lead to greater economic output, for economic growth, for economic development, basically focusing on young people, the world of work, the future world of work, and then neglecting older populations who do not have so much of a stake in that future world of work. And so lacking in all of this is a critical discussion on what AI represents in Africa, how fair it is, how good it is for Africans, and who is determining the principles of these AI technologies, and what are the perspectives in Africa that this AI, the indigenous African knowledge and values that these AI systems do not necessarily imbibe. And so the principles currently, they come from global north. So these principles include things like risk aversion, mitigation, transparency, accountability, autonomy, impact assessment, and things like that. And so it means that there are so many techno-utopians in Africa. And when I say techno-utopians, people who are optimistic when it comes to AI technologies without really being critical about some of its side effects. However, bearing this in mind, I see a reversal in the tide where African countries and governments are now beginning to implement or introduce AI policies and strategies. So these are soft laws; they are not legally binding. They come in form of strategies or policies. Countries that have developed some of this include Egypt, Rwanda, Mauritius, and others like Algeria, Tunisia, Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, and Uganda are also developing their policies. So we see that African countries are beginning to play more of a role in developing their own policies and strategies. So these are some of the current strategies. Like the Mauritius Artificial Intelligence Strategy in 2018, the Egypt National Artificial Intelligence Strategy in 2021, and the National AI Policy for Rwanda that was just released this year in 2023. And so it shows that African countries are beginning to play more of a role in this space. Nonetheless, in spite of this, in spite of the role that African countries are playing, these initiatives are still not enough. From my observation, they are still not enough. What is needed is there's a need to go beyond this country-based initiatives into transcontinental partnerships. In Africa, there's already what we call the Malabo Convention, which is Africa's data protection law. There's also Smart Africa, which is like a private sector, multi-stakeholder arrangement for AI development in Africa. So those are good. But beyond this, I see the need for Africa to leverage the AI knowledge base in other continents and learn from best practices in respectful give and take. So Africa play more of a role in actually the exchange of AI skills and knowledge and technologies and regulatory standards and all of that. So partnerships that are needed to ensure that Africa plays more of an important role in this space. And the question then is how? How do these partnerships evolve? And so for these partnerships to really be vital to really materialize in Africa, there's a need for African stakeholders, policymakers and developers and others also to increase their engagement in the field of AI. And this partnership should be developed with international tech firms and development partners. And it should not involve the cookie cutter approach, which is a wholesale adoption of AI technologies meant for other populations. But African stakeholders, developers, policymakers should be involved in actually developing or co-creating the policies that are needed in the AI space. And so I say the focus should be on building ethical use of AI, developing AI based on African values and principles, and ensuring that Africans themselves drive the advancement and deployment of AI. So Africans being really, really critical in playing a role in advancing AI technologies in Africa. So to do this, there's a need to increase the pool of AI experts in Africa. And this will require, again, massive education and training programs across the continent to develop AI products that are suitable for the African context. So ensuring that Africans play a role, ensuring that respectful give and take. So Africans can learn from elsewhere, but African stakeholders really need to play a role in developing and advancing and shaping the way the technology operates on the continent. And when it comes to governance, there's also a need for an inclusive AI governance that requires international level regulation. And so by international level regulation, I mean it's a call for countries, private sector groups, civil society organizations globally to develop a multi-stakeholder protocol that is inclusive, systemic, and flexible. And such an approach is needed, I say, because of the global nature of AI. Because if we leave the system to run the way it presently is, there's a danger that AI standards and regulations will be shaped by standards in the global north. For instance, in Europe is becoming the default comparator for AI regulatory debate. So there's that danger that Africa will be missing in the debate about AI governance. And so the how, again, of this multi-stakeholder governance, I see a three-tiered system at the national level, at the regional level, and the global level. So there's national level where African countries are already playing a role, like Mauritius, like Egypt, like Rwanda. There's the regional level policies where, for instance, the African Union is developing its own policies on AI. And then Europe, for instance, with the EU AI Act. And so now the global level policies where there's a need, I see, for a protocol that sets the underlying parameters for AI regulation. So the things that affect the entire world, where if regulation does not come in at that global level, there's a danger, the tendency that to be shaped by European policies or American policies or Chinese or global north policies. So things like access, things like the design of AI, things like algorithmic design and all of that, there's a need to set international global parameters. And for these global parameters to really work, these three features have to be taken on board: inclusivity, systemic, and flexible. So it has to be inclusive. It has to include the voices of Africans, the voices of global South stakeholders generally. Systemic, it has to really address the fundamental issues involved in platform and AI regulation. So addressing, for instance, the big fundamental issues, comprehensive regulation. Examples include things like the business model of AI, of big tech platforms. So going after all of this systemic, not just surface level regulation, but really systemic regulation, and flexible also, so you can move with the tide of the changes that go on in technological development. So for instance, having sunset regulations, where, for instance, the law might run its course after like 5 or 10 years, and then it might either be developed or repealed or kept as it is. So having such an approach, and I say this will be vital in ensuring that African stakeholders, having these three basic features, will be vital in ensuring that African stakeholders have a chance to shape AI policies in a meaningful way and in accordance with the values that they hold there. And so this will be key, basically, in ensuring that Africa no longer becomes just a technology receiver and a standard taker. Thank you very much for listening.